Now, it comes with a description, but the whole reason for doing this video is that we never liked the explanation in this very much. We have a electronic rev counter fitted to this 1973 750 Sport. The first job is to make sure that the piston on the front cylinder is somewhere in the area of bottom dead center. And you can see there we are at top dead center. Welcome to another video here at Back to Classics, and today we're going to discuss and adjust the ignition system on this 750 Sport we're restoring. There's a lot to tell about ignition systems. That goes a little bit too far for the scope of this video, as we're going to explain how it is set up and adjusted. But if you want to read more about ignition systems, what they do, how they function, you can follow the link in the description, because I once wrote an article about that, explaining all the different types of ignition system Ducati used over the years and how they are best kept in order and sometimes replaced or upgraded to a modern system. Speaking of a modern system, the 750 round case engines all came with points ignition. Nothing wrong with that, but it needs maintenance. You need to adjust it, keep adjusting it. So in this instance we're going to fit a upgraded ignition system, which is made by a company called Sachse in Germany, and that is going to be fitted. It's completely modern in the sense that it is digital. You can choose a whole range of advanced curves when it comes to the ignition. A very good system actually, and a very nice upgrade on a 750 round case. There are different types of ignition systems available for different types of engines, but they all basically do the same. So I hope to be able to explain in this video how to set up this ignition system for the 750 round case, but it could also be used for the 860 square case and the single cylinders as well, because it's basically all the same system that we're selling as an upgrade system for these bikes. So let's dive into it. I'm sure that there will be some questions. Maybe, perhaps, did you think, well, did I explain that good enough? Be sure to add that in the comment section below this video, and I hope to be able to answer any question that you might have. So let's dive into it and see how it is set up. So let's get started with our ignition system. Today we're going to aim at the 750 round case engine, but the basics are the same for all Ducati models. So whether you have a single cylinder model or a 750 round case or an 860 early square case or later Bosch ignition system that you would like to have replaced, we have systems for all of these models, all different types. So if you have any doubt on what specific parts you need, give us a quick email and we'll be sure to help you out. But today, as I said, we're going to focus on the 750 round case, and for that we need this whole system. So let's dive in what we have here and what it all does. So what we need is the ignition system itself, boxed in here. We need a set of ignition coils that we see here. We need some spark plug lead, HD lead, available in different colors, and also a pair of these and spark plug caps, because these modern systems are, well, they're quite sensitive to the parts used in this, because you need a high resistance on that. But more on that later. So let's first unbox this. Let's see what we got here. All nicely wrapped up, as you can expect. So we've unboxed the whole set and all the different parts that are in there. So going over them, this is actually the Sachse ignition system that you have here. These are all included in that system, in that package. And what we have here is basically how it works is this: a fixed plate, so a set of a stator, if you can call it that, fitted inside the ignition housing. And you see here some sensors on there, and a magnet disc that will rotate with the engine. And you see here some magnets in there, and these will, the Hall effect sensors, and these will trigger the ignition. That signal goes through that cable inside this ignition box. This is actually where all the magic happens. There's a digital circuit inside. We don't go over that in this video, but that's some more complicated stuff going on there. Basically what it does, it being told by the ignition rotor and stator that it needs to fire, so the ignition point, the top dead center, is reached, and that is when that box gives a signal, or in fact signal to ground, cutting the ground on the coils that we see later, giving a spark to the spark plug. And that is done inside. There are two switches on here, which we'll go over later. One is for the rev limiter, and the other one is for the ignition curve, which we'll go over later as well. So that needs to be all fitted to the bike. Now you might wonder what these are. These are specific for the round case engine. As we again see later, this is to replace the original condensers for the points ignition, and these are on the outside of that specific housing the 750 round case has, and you can replace them with these. Just basically two pieces of aluminium that go inside there. Going further, of course that ignition box that you saw earlier gives a signal to the ignition coils. You can see here, we like to use these. These are made by Dyna, very compact and very good quality ignition coil. And that comes with a set of connectors for you to connect the wiring and the spark plug lead. Again, these are ready here. Most bikes, most models have them in simple black material. Then in 73 they use this green one, and on earlier bikes, 750, we see these red ones appear. But basically they all do the same, of course, whether apart from the color. And that goes into the spark plug cap, as you see here. We very much like to use these by NGK, and well, that's some fitments there to connect all those up. So these are all the parts. Now it comes with a description, but the whole reason for doing this video is that we never liked the explanation in this very much. We can do a much better job and a much simpler description with this video, hopefully. So let's dive into the setup on the bike. Well, I've made this this bracket for all the parts to hold to on the bike, and as you can see, we have the two coils here and the ignition box, and that needs to be wired up according to the manual that is delivered with the system. It's actually quite simple. You only have to make some connections between the bike's 12-volt system, switched over the ignition switch, and then you have some additional wiring to do from the ignition box to the coils. So let's dive into that right now and make some electrical connections where they should be. So we got some different color wire here. Black, as we like to continue the color scheme of the original wiring loom. Black is used for ground. We need to ground the whole system to the frame, so that is what we use here. Green is the color in the wiring loom that gives the 12-volt to the ignition, switched over by the ignition switch. So we're going to continue this along with the green. Then we have a electronic rev counter fitted to this 1973 750 Sport. So that needs to have a connection from the ignition box, which we're going to make in red. And then we have the wires from the ignition box to the ignition coils, the ground, which is actually switched by the box itself, in orange black for the horizontal cylinder and yellow black for the vertical cylinder. So that needs to be connected up. So let's do that right now. So we got this all wired up, as you can see here. This is the connection to the bike's wiring loom, and then we have from there some different wires running, as you can see here, the green that powers the ignition box and both the coils, one for the front and one for the rear cylinder. And then we have some wires. Actually, it's written on the ignition box what all the connections are, counting from 10 to 1. As you can see, it is all written down what it should be. So here we have the ignition coil, and then we have the ground. Then there are some empty spaces that we're going to connect later on, as these are coming from the pickup sensor. Then we have the red connection is for the electronic rev counter, the 12 volt as we discussed, powering the system. And then we have the other ignition coil on the 10th position. Ground wire to be fitted. So this is all good to go, as well as these that I've made, HT leads going to the spark plugs. So let's fit it all on the bike now. So we have fitted the whole of the system right here on the frame, and it is time to move our attention now to this pickup we have here, and the ignition housing, the original ignition housing on the round case engine. Now you saw these two aluminium parts that go in there. We're not going to use them in this case because we have these very nice and original condensers still with the Ducati ignition, Ducati inscription on there. So we're going to fit those. Of course, these will not be doing anything on this particular engine, as we are using this modern electronic ignition system. So we have this, the ignition stator, which will fit inside that housing. So let's screw that down in the correct position. Only one position for that. Screws are coming with it. And then we have this part, also comes with the set to get on there. There is a notch here, as well as on the original shaft. It slides over there. So there's only one way it can go. Again, screw is supplied in the set. And then we have the rotor. Now that rotor is marked, as you can see, with an S and an N and an arrow indicating the direction of the engine as it turns, and that goes over there. Now you see here some tiny screws, and that is what we're going to use to adjust it, because this obviously needs to be set in the correct position for the engine to fire at the right time. So that is what we're going to do next. So now we have fitted all the different components of the ignition system. The ignition pickup right here with the stator and the rotor. Then we have the two ignition coils and the ignition box, obviously. And I have fitted a test battery to see how it all functions and actually to adjust the system. Now that adjustment is quite important, and is where most people fear they don't know enough about the ignition system to actually adjust it themselves. But as we can show you right now, it is actually quite easy to do that. You need some tools, you need some basic knowledge, but what in fact this system requires is only to know where top dead center is. Top dead center of the front cylinder. And that's what we're going to show you now. First, how to find top dead center, and then to set the ignition system accordingly. The rest is done all by this digital ignition box, and it is actually done in a very, very good way that you don't have to look at it again in the future. Just keep your battery charged and the bike is good to go with the ignition system, the digital ignition system now fitted. So next job on our ignition system setup is to find top dead center. Now there are people using screwdrivers inside the spark plug hole and try to see where the piston reaches top dead center. Others, you can use meters in there with a gauge. Much more complicated, and you need some special tooling for that as well. We have a very simple and effective way of finding top dead center, for which you need one of these, which is a protractor disc with a tool to turn the engine. And you need one of these, a simple stop to prevent the piston from going all the way up. And it's just simply put in the spark plug hole. I will explain to you how that actually works. So let's dive into it. First job is to remove the spark plugs. That'll be much easier to turn the engine and effectively enable us to get it to top dead center using our tool. So that's one, and that is two. Next, we're going to fit this one, the protractor disc, on the end of the crankshaft. Now, this is a special tool made for Ducati engines, twin engines, and it goes in beautifully, and you can just tighten this M8 bolt to make sure that it does stay in place like that. Now, we have written on our protector disc the way the engine turns, the direction. All bevel twins, they move backwards. All other Ducatis move forwards, which may be a subject for a different video why that actually is. But let's assume it is the way it is right now. Then we have our pointer to give it a reference. And we can fit that here right on the clutch cover. And we make sure that it is close to the protector disc. Let's see how that goes. Beautiful. There is a nut on the back of this tool that enables you to move the protractor disc apart from the actual position. But that we're going to use later. We have to make sure that it is rather tight, but not too tight, because you do want to move this about a little bit, as we can see later. So that's all set up. Now let's go to finding top dead center. Okay, so now we have fitted this turning tool and our pointer to see where to get a reading of the protractor disc. We can move forward, and that is the first job, is to make sure that the piston on the front cylinder is somewhere in the area of bottom dead center in order to prevent it from being in the way. So you can look inside and you can see the piston going down, which gives us the opportunity to fit our special tool inside the spark plug hole. Now the pin on there is long enough to prevent the piston from going all the way up. So just fit it like this, and then we can move turn the engine further, but be careful, because at some point that piston will hit the tool. So be careful not to be too aggressive, or otherwise you can damage the top of the piston when it jams against that tool. So moving it forward, following the direction of the bevel twin engine. You see here, I feel it hitting that special tool. So that gives us the opportunity to get a reading, or actually to set it at some point where we can get a reading from in the future. So I set it at 0 top, knowing that this is not actually top dead center, but what we can see now when we move it the other way is we find the position where the piston hits the tool before top dead center. So moving it against the direction it normally goes. So the engine, sorry, the piston will move down now and then up again, hitting the tool again on the other side of the 360-degree point. Well, here we find it. Here it is jamming, and we can make a reading there, and it actually is 86 degrees. So it's 86 degrees difference from the first reading that we made when we set it on top. Now 86, we need to divide that by 2 to get the reading what it is in the middle, which is 43, which means that the engine currently is 43 degrees before top dead center. So setting our protector disc at 43. There we go. Setting at 43 degrees. When we move it the other way again, so again we're using the direction the engine is normally fires in, we need to find the exact same number, 43, on the other side of top dead center. So that's a check to see if we're on the right path here. So let's do that. Moving it through bottom dead center right here, and the piston goes up again, and it should jam against that tool at 43 degrees. Now let's see, nearly there, and it hits exactly at 43 degrees. So now it's easy to find top dead center, just moving it a little bit back in order to not to damage that piston again. We can take out our special tool and be sure not to touch that protractor disc again. But if we put the engine on 0 now, we have an accurate found top dead center. There it is. Now that we have found top dead center, the ignition can be adjusted. Now what you see here is a marking, an S and an N marking on that disc. Now with the ignition switched on, you see that lights going on like that. And what we should aim for is for the light to go off exactly at top dead center. So irrespective of the engine now turning, I can still turn that little disc, and what you can see when we pass it through N, that the light will switch off. I'm looking at this ignition pickup sensor for the front cylinder, because that is at top dead center right now. And there you can see it putting off. So that's roughly the position we're looking for. But I can move it further, and you can see the same thing happening. So again, when it goes through S, the light goes on, and at top dead center, that light should go off. So I'm just moving it very slowly to get the position where the light goes off. Hope you can see that. There it goes off. Okay, so now I have to tighten these screws to make sure that the rotor rotates with the engine. So let's do that right now. Make sure not to over tighten it, especially the first go you have. There we go. So now when I will be turning the engine and see when the light goes off. So we're still at top dead center, and I'm moving the engine in the correct direction, and you see it, the rotor is now turning with it. So we're now at bottom dead center. Light goes on. Now I'm getting close to top dead center. Just a few degrees off now. Going very slowly, and there you see it switching off. And I'm doing a reading here. I'll show you right now where we are. So the light went off, but it went off at 2 degrees before top dead center, which is not good enough. We need to have it at absolutely 0. So we're going to attempt to move that rotor 2 degrees backwards to get it to the correct position. So I'm happy with the adjustment right now. We're just 1 degree before top dead center. The light is still on, as you can see there, and just very slowly moving it forward, and there it goes off, and you can see there we are at top dead center. So now it's just a matter of getting those screws a little more tight in there to make sure that that rotor stays where it should be, and we're actually done with setting this ignition system. So that's all set up and done for this one. And the last thing we need to do is to get a selection made of the available ignition advanced curves that you can show you right now in this diagram. Depends a little bit on how you want to use it, but there's actually no specific advice that we can give you here. All curves are good, and you can adjust them as you go along. It's very easy to change the curves as well, so you can probably, when you test drive the bike, try to find the most suitable advanced curve for your bike and driving style. So that concludes the fitting and adjusting of the ignition system. Like I said before, this is the 750 GT Sport and Super Sport version of the Zaxe ignition system, but basically setting it on a single cylinder or a later 860 square case more or less is the same. The basic principles are the same, so this video hopefully is a reference for those ignition systems as well. Like I said, the base is quite simple. You need to be aware of what you're doing, but the system, once you have set it up, is absolutely maintenance free and is much better, much more modern, digital of course, compared to the original points, or especially for the 860 when electronic ignition was fitted from the factory. This system is much better than that ever was. So that concludes this video. We hope you liked it. Be sure to make sure to follow us and find out more videos. We might as well come back with a video on this 750 Sport as well later on. So hope you liked it. Thanks for watching. Toodle-dokie. See you next time.